to ask questions to Rabbi Berger. We are now recording this session, so anybody who is not on and wants to watch a video, or anyone who is on and wants to watch it again, I will send out a link to that tomorrow, and later in the week I will send out a link to next Monday's presentation, which is at the same time on Monday, March 10th. So, having said all that, I am going to turn it over to Rabbi Berger, and I will turn my camera off and mute my microphone. So you are on.
Thank you. This webinar I'm presenting in memory of our friend Jacob Wien, who was actually present at an earlier, much shorter version of this presentation at the last Mussar and a lot of what it was able to expand and make it a fuller workshop was due to his feedback. So this is in memory of Yaakov Shlomo ben Shneur Zalman. We're approaching the concept of prayer. It's very difficult to understand exactly what we're trying to accomplish, because I'm sure many of you have wondered, what exactly are we going to get out of begging God, right? If you want something, then and you don't have it, so then clearly it's because God decided that what you want and what's in your best interest are different things. So why am I bothering to pray and ask for things? And we have prayers that aren't requests, which gets into the question of the structure of prayer. Does God even need prayer? I mean, what could I possibly be telling God that He doesn't already know about what's going on in my mind? And so the concept of prayer and how we are to relate to prayer may actually be, to a certain extent, an example of how to relate to ritual in general. There's a verse in Bereshit 48:22, if you want to look it up. V'ani nasati lecha. I will switch that to Israeli. V'ani nasati lecha shechem echad al achecha. Jacob says to his son Joseph, as Jacob lays on his deathbed. I see where the word lives came out. That I will give you one portion more than your brothers. There's actually a pun there because the word portion, Shechem, is actually a city that ends up in the territory of Joseph. I'm not sure what that has to do with anything. It's just clever. Then again, no one underestimated the author of Genesis. So, Asher lakachti miyad ha'emori, which I took from the hands of the Amorites, guessing, b'charbi v'kashti, with my sword and with my bow. And the rabbis are very bothered by this, because it's not in Jewish tradition to laud military victory as major accomplishment. You might be impressed with a military victory. It doesn't fit the way the rabbis see the characters in this narrative for him to be talking about the fact that he won something, that he won a military victory from the Amorites, or whatever they're normally called in English. So if you take a traditional chumash on the side, there's a number of targumim of translations into Aramaic, and the Targum Yonatan translates with my sword and with my bow as Bitzaloti Uva'uti, with my prayers and with my requests. And we see something similar in Baba Basra, in the Talmud. Harbi, this is tefillah, this is request. So in the eyes of the rabbis, getting something from the Amorites, the big accomplishment was not the military victory that he knew how to wield a sword and a bow and arrow, but that he knew how to pray. And there are two kinds of prayers that we're being introduced to here. We're dealing with tefillah and request. And you might even recognize, depends how good you are at reconjugating Aramaic, But Solosi Uti is actually Sulosana Uva Usana, our prayers and our requests when we recite it in Kaddish. So this is a phrase that we can actually relate to. This is the first phrase that we touched on in the Siddur, actually, that we can relate to with a second meaning. But the idea is that there's actually two kinds of prayer. There's tefillah and requests. So the Vilna Gaon, he characterizes these two kinds of prayer. And he says that Litpalel, to pray, is usually said exactly the way I just did, Litpalel, which is in a reflexive conjugation. Meaning it's something I do to myself. I turn myself into a prayer. Whereas the Uthon, or to make a request, is something more straightforward. So the prayer, the tefillah mode of prayer is to turn myself into something. And both Rav Hirsch and Rabbi J.B. Soloveitchik take this idea to say that what we do with tefillah is changing ourselves into the kind of person that God would want to bequeath the thing we're asking. So what is the whole point of sitting down with the same siddur every day? The point is to find things in the thoughts of people who came before us about the ideals that tradition tells us God would want us to make manifest, and inculcating them. So we repeat them and repeat them and repeat them to bring them into ourselves. This is very Mussar, no? This is beginning to sound like hitpa'alut, chanting or analyzing a sentence in order to bring an idea into ourselves, not just intellectually, but actually change ourselves to better correspond to the ideal in the verse. So that is the hitpalel. But uton, to make a request, is more straightforward. Right? We're supposed to be viewing God as a parent, as another source of resources when we need help, or even when we don't realize we need help. And therefore, we turn to God with our straightforward requests, with the things that are on our mind. And we can actually see these two kinds of prayers in our siddur, although really the distinction is a little more complicated than the first tier of explanation. So what we find is that in the Amidah, let's say there's a prayer for help, but we're instructed to insert a personal request into the prayer for help. If you know somebody who needs help, it is appropriate to say something about that person into the prayer. Similarly, our prayers in our siddur that started out being requests, and then through common usage became part of the siddur. And you can't always tell which ones are which, but one tip-off that the Vilna Gaon gives us is it's written in the singular. So prayer written in the singular is really trying to be more expressing what most of us are feeling. And prayers that are written in the plural could be either way. But the idea is, and this is why we're saying that perhaps the issue of ritual in general, there's the ritual, there's the prayer, we're calling tefillah, that inculcates or impresses an idea. And then there is the tahanunim, the requests, the uton, which are to express a religious feeling. So you have rituals that impress and rituals that express. And this might even be a thought that the Mesilat Yesharim hints at in its opening. It says, Yisod HaChasidut V'Shoresh HaAvodah, the foundation of piety and the root of work, or of worship. And the words are kind of not what you normally would have thought. Because you would think that Hasidut is more natural, and therefore Hasidut would have the root. We would talk about the root of Hasidut. And Avodah, which is work or worship, that would have a yesod, that would have a foundation. That's more artificial. And what we're seeing here is that not only is there a worship that is Hasidut, that is an expression of our closeness to God, and a worship that is Avodah, that is to work on ourselves to become closer to God. they're mixed. So the yesod of Hasidut, you have to work at Hasidut, and yet also avodah comes naturally. So this is the two modes of prayer that we're talking about, and I will be, at least in this first class, focusing more on Siddur prayer and how to relate to the words of the liturgy. How do we take these words and inculcate them? Or how do we take this philosophy that I've been spending the last 12 minutes on and make it a practice? So when did the Siddur begin? Siddur began, as it says in the ad for this webinar, there's a number of opinions in the Talmud. Shimon Hapakuli established something of the Amidah in front of Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Yochanan objects. He says, no, the Amidah actually well predates Shimon Hapakuli. It was established back in the days of the men of the Great Assembly. So there were 120 elders, among them many prophets, and they established the 18 blessings according to their order. So the framework, maybe the contents, date after the Second Temple, but the framework, the idea that there's this sequence of 18 blessings, that actually dates to the beginning of the Second Temple, and it's important that Rabbi Yochanan says that it includes thank you. Now let's switch it. Okay, that it includes a number of prophets. Rabbi Yochanan makes a point of saying that this group includes a number of prophets because this is what makes the Siddur. And this is a point that the Rambam Maimonides returns to repeatedly, that the people who established our Siddur were the last of the prophets. The idea being that the prophets saw the end of this dialogue with God. And so they gave us a way to sort of invite God into a conversation, which we can no longer do directly. So we do through the words of the prophets and roughly a millennium of sages since then, more actually, because the Siddur continues to evolve. But the idea is that the Siddur is a continuation of the prophetic period. So the ideas in the Siddur are supposed to be seen as the words of God. The metaphor that we usually get on how to relate to God, most of these metaphors don't really work for me because I'm a product of Queens, New York. I grew up in a democracy. Referring to God as king, which may work intellectually, is not really something I can internalize. And then as you get to later periods, they might use feudal metaphors. And I've never been a lord or a serf, so that doesn't really touch me emotionally either. So I'm going to give a punier metaphor, but one that I can actually relate to, and that is picture being in a limited partnership. We're going to call it BMBW LLP for Better Me, Better World Limited Partnership. There are two partners, myself and God. God is the CEO, senior partner, and major investor in the firm. I'm the programmer who is at the bottom of the org chart. But I get a meeting with him regularly. Needless to say, I'm going to be a little tense. But also needless to say, how does one make requests in that situation? Right? If you don't want to tell the boss that, gee, I need another computer because, well, it would be a lot of fun to have a faster computer. Rather, you're telling the boss, I need a faster computer because BMBW Limited needs the resources. So when we take tefillah, we're approaching God, we're approaching Him in this covenantal context. I'm not saying this is a tit for tat, this is a contract. I do my part, you do your part, God, yay, contract is satisfied. But rather, the two of us are working together to make something together. This is more the covenantal mode that Judaism always talks about, the bris, the covenant. So in a covenant, myself and the senior partner can come together and I can hear through his delegates what he is saying to me, and I could come to him and say, well, I know I would like my mother to be healthier. Actually, I would. That vaccine is kind of severe for me. I know I would want my mother to be healthier, but really, let's view this from the context of the world would be a better place. The world that you yourself want to create would be a better place if there were more health in it. And that, I think, is the approach that we need to bring to the Siddur. The approach we should be having is that this is a way of us learning that we and God are partnering together to make a better world. And that the things we would normally ask for need to be seen in that context, not in a selfish context. That's the first piece. So how do we take those ideas, which were that there are two forms of prayer, which are two forms of ritual, which are really archetypes because you're going to want requests in your structured prayer, and you're going to want some structure to your request. The notion of a meeting with the senior partner, and the idea that tefillah brings me to seeing the world as a partnership between myself and God to make the world a better place. So how do we make any of that what we're actually doing when we sit down for the Siddur? So the key, I believe, is hitpa'alut, as I said earlier. This set of tools that the Mussar movement created to inculcate ideas, usually from Mussar texts, but we're going to be using it for the Siddur, to pray with hitpa'alut. This is... I'm having a technical issue getting the slide up. If somebody who knows if one of the hosts can help me get the slide up, I would appreciate it. Otherwise, you're going to be bored for a second or two. Okay, so there it is. Not quite the same colors as the original, but whatever. Let's turn to the Siddur, because the whole theme we're going with is that the basic truths of Judaism are all in the Siddur, ready to be inculcated. So this quote is from the first blessing before Shema in Shacharit, in the morning prayer. And it says, V'chula mekabelim aleim. I'll just read the English because I would like to get to actual workshop. This is speaking now of the angels. So as we pray, as we thank God for continually creating light and hope in the world, we take a little detour and speak about the fact that the angels do so as well. And they all accept the yoke of the kingdom of the one in heaven, one from the other, which, by the way, is proof we're talking about the angels, because we've never heard of people cooperating on worship. If we would, the Temple Mount would be a much quieter place. And give permission one to the other to sanctify, or maybe it's more philosophically precise to say, to proclaim the sanctity of their Maker. The Nachat Ruach, with a tranquil spirit, the Safa Verura, with a clear language, with an ima, and with a pleasant voice. So there's Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, the recently retired chief rabbi of the UK, I believe it's the UK and not Great Britain. I was born in Queens, so I don't know the difference. Points out that we are praising the ideal prayer. We're describing the ideal prayer as operating on three planes. Spiritual tranquility, right? The Nahat Ruach, the tranquil spirit. Safa Verura, the clear language, meaning that you understand the words and you're speaking precisely. Uvene'ima, and with a pleasantness, so that there is an aesthetic beauty. And each of these can be brought to prayer to deepen our relationship with the various lines of prayer and reach that level of internalization. We will start, because this is Micha Berger, and that's where Micha Berger starts. We will start with cognitive clarity, and we're going to look at ways of adding meaning and depth to the verse, finding what a line of the Siddur means to me. I want to visualize this exercise, this idea of bringing lines of the Siddur to me, and using the metaphor of building a palace, which is, of course, the title that I gave the webinar. So picture picking up a stone at the quarry, and it requires finishing, and you edge the stone, and you give the stone the decoration it needs. If you've seen the pile of stones at the south corner of the Temple Mount, you might be able to picture the same mental image I am. If not, then any stonework will do. There's the decoration around the border. There's making sure that all the lines are straight and even. There's polishing it, because this is going to be a stone in the palace for the king. And you want the final palace to be a thing of beauty, of glory. And when you go over the stone again and again and polish it, it gains mass. It gains weight. The term for concentration that is often used in Talmudic Hebrew is koved rosh, heaviness of the head, which we would think of as being tired and the head drooping. But in this metaphor, it's the idea that things are heavy or hard to move. So if we could come to prayer from a position of koved rosh, as the Mishnah asks us to, then the prayer would have weight, and we wouldn't be able to simply be blown away from it with every little shiny object that passes by. So the idea is to take this one stone and work over it a period of a week or weeks until the exercise for this one verse becomes rote. And then randomly pick another one. And then another one. And each time we're going to sharpen our relationship with that verse, cognitively, cognitively, aesthetically, and then spiritually, as a consequence of the first two. And we will, one by one, put in place stones for the palace of the Lord. And that should be the Siddur. And with it's not that many lines of practice. Once you get one line, let's say in Ashrei, one of the prayers in the Siddur, once you have a line from Ashrei that you've made yours, that you found what it says to you, you have your own perspective, your own insight, may have not be a new insight, but it's your insight. Right? Then when you pass it the next time around, even though you're focusing on something else, it's still your line. And you could take possession and thereby internalize, which is what we were saying is the whole point of Tefillah, the Talel, to internalize the truth that the last of the prophets tell us is the message of the other party in our limited partnership. So, the reason why I'm starting with cognitive clarity, with the understanding end of things, is because it's easiest. Or at least it's easiest for people put together like me, and I can only draw from my own experience. But I find it's easiest. And this slide that I just put up from the introduction to Ashrei shows why. If you look, there are three sections to this introduction. 2 verses, 3 sections, a repeating refrain of the word ashrei, which is praiseworthy. I translated it enriched, following Rav Hirsch. But there is a near repetition. And near repetitions make it very easy to play cognitively with a sentence. Because now I need to know, why is there a near repetition and not a full repetition? What does Yoshevei Veitecha say to me that Ha'am Shekachalo does not? What does those who dwell in your house are forever praising you, different than saying the nation for whom such is the case? Because such is the case sounds like we're referring back to the previous sentence, although actually if you look, they are 2 unrelated verses that don't actually, it's not such as a case came from the prior line. One is in chapter 84, one is in chapter 144. The third is that Hashem is its God. Why does it mean saying Hashem is its God and they will continue praising you? Why are those who sit in your house those who are continually praying you, as opposed to those for whom you are their God? What does it mean to sit in God's house? And these are all things we could be doing over and over again, repeating these 2 verses until we've really felt that we've come to a relationship with these verses. So I'm going to repeat them a few times. Unfortunately, I can't create a situation where we all hear each other, which would be a little more proactive. But the idea is for this to be a workshop. So I will take you on your honor that you will be saying it along, and that I will not be doing this solo. So Ashrei Yoshevei Veitecha Od Yalucha Selah. Ashrei Yoshevei Veitecha Od Yalucha Selah. Enriched are those who dwell in your house. They are forever praising you, Selah. Enriched are those who dwell in your house. They are forever praising you, Selah. 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 Which is, by the way, a very hard word to translate, so I didn't. It appears to be I don't know the right term. It's been too long since high school grammar. A word like, interject, whatever. Ashrei ha'am shakachalo, praised or enriched is the nation that this is the case for them. Praise is the nation for whom such is the case. Praise is the nation for whom such is the case. Praise the nation for whom such is the case. Right? Shakachalo, that is for it, to the nation, the case. Why do we focus on nationality when it comes to dwelling in Hashem's self? And why is this a special thing on a national level? Right? This is the kind of cognitive clarity by repeating. This is the Tzpalalut of the Kelm tradition, where you repeat a line, and each time you're emphasizing a different word from the verse to get clarity, to find insight, to find new material in a verse that you may have said for the last 30 years. But this time you can say it anew. You can say it differently, and you can say it not just with your brain. Let's take the next example. From later on in Ashrei. I like this case, probably because I had much success with it. Because as I said, all I can draw from is my own experience. Malchutecha malchut kol alamim. Your kingship, your rule, is a rule for all generations. Your kingship is a kingship for all generations. Mamshaltecha, and your rule is for all ages, and your rule is for all generations. And you could tell from how many times I I drifted from my original translation, how close I find the first and second halves of this line. So why is the first line talking about Malchut, which is a king or a queen? It's a rule of the sense of that kind of covenant between the serf and the king, as opposed to a moshel, a dictator, who is ruling from generation to generation. Why do we see God as a dictator at all? Is that something we want, or is that a necessary evil? And why is that from generation to generation, whereas kingship is for all of eternity? Now, my point here is not to point out this verse. My point is to show you that any line from the Siddur where you see a doubling, it is relatively easy to start asking questions about the two halves of the double against each other. And now I can say this bihitpa'alut, working on myself. Malchutecha malchut kol olamim, memshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor. Malchutecha malchut kol olamim, umemshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor. Malchutecha malchut kol olamim, umemshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor. Malchutcha malchut kol olamim, umemshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor. Malchutecha 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 malchut kol olamim, umemshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor. So one thing I just noticed, despite having had success delving into this verse in the past, just right now doing this exercise, the whole dor v'dor includes this generation. There's a very personal statement in the whole dor v'dor and kol olamim. It's not just a general, hypothetical, every generation. By saying in every generation, and not just the mystic past or the prophetic future, we're saying that this relationship of Memshalah applies to us too. In this next example, which I brought up also from Ashrei, I want to show you something else I did. The men of the great, this is not from the men of the great, this is attributed to David. Right, the opening, the primary chapter that is Ashrei, opens Tilala David. It's a psalm of praise attributed to David. And the problem is the grammar of the second half of this line. So the simple translation, which I assume is in most, open your Siddur after this class, using this new. You open your hands, which obviously is metaphoric, let's open it in quotes, and satisfy the desire of every living being. Now the problem is satisfy the desire of every living being, which is generally how it's translated, would be Umasbiya Mitzon Kol Chai. So if you look at more arcane translations, you get things like satisfy the need of every living being to be desirable. So you're satisfying every living being, Ratzon, its need for desirability. Or satisfy every living being to have desires, because people without desires are bored. So this is there's no one right translation. The question is, why did David use the poetic license rather than the straightforward construction of the verse? Now, part of it is simple poetry. There's a rhyme and rhythm pattern to Ashrei. But also, this multiplicity of meaning is not ambiguity. It's actually prophetic, divinely inspired, and it gives us the ability to say the same thing every day, and yet be saying something different each time. So one day I could be saying and willingly satisfy every living being. One day I could say and satisfy the desires of every living being. Or one day I could be saying it Talut, right? Poteach et yadecha, you open your hand, right? This is a powerful metaphor that God opens his hand. Now, which hand is it? Is it the hand that has the gift, or is it the hand that's holding the first one back? Right? Do we need God to start giving, or do we need God to, or in which God has no reasons to hold back? Umaspia lechol chayratzon, umaspia, and he satisfies, he brings contentment. Oh, how hard it is to be content with the things he gives me. Umaspia lechol chayratzon, umaspia lechol chayratzon, he brings every living thing. But it needs every living thing. He brings every single one. I am not concerned with how a God who runs the entire universe can be interested in my needs. Because a God who is great enough to run the universe is great enough to deal with all of us. Now these, again, I'm not trying to teach you this verse. We're trying to get you to say this verse as I say this verse. I'm trying to get you to adopt the practice by which I came to having this relationship with this verse. So the idea is not to dwell too much on any one example, because then I'll just be teaching you to see the verse as I do. Similarly, we have in the opening to the Amidah, another doubling. Adonai Sfatai Tiftach, God, open my lips, ufi yagid tilatecha, and my mouth will speak your praise, or will tell of your praises. Because, whatever. Why I chose tell is okay. But what is the difference between opening my lips and my mouth speaking your praises? And why is God opening my lips, but my side of the deal is that God to open my lips so that I can speak his praises. I can't speak his praises without God opening my lips. Please open my lips. And is it meaningful that we're talking about the lips, the outside of me, the distractible me, the superficiality of me, that I'm asking God to Adonai Sfatai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tilasecha Adonai Sfatai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tilasecha Adonai Sfatai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tilasecha Ufi Yagid Tilasecha Adonai Sfatai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tilasecha. Hashem, open my lips, and my mouth will tell of your praises. Hashem, open my lips, and my mouth will tell of your praises. Hashem, open my lips, and my mouth will tell of your praises. And why am I attributing it to my mouth? Like I don't have free will? Is this prayer actually acknowledging the fact that most of us pray on autopilot? So we're asking God for help to at least pray on autopilot, and my mouth will say the praises by itself? It's a kind of radical idea, but it might be what the prayer is saying. If I can't establish kavanah for the entire Amidah, at least let my mouth go through the exercise so that in future iterations it'll be that much easier to pray with kavanah. So with that, we open the Amidah. There is one text that there are two texts in the Siddur that we are obligated to pray with kavanah. The first one we saw earlier was Poteach et Yadecha, which is a line in Ashrei, that we are acknowledging that God opens his hand and provides for the needs of every living being. The second is the first blessing of the and in the earlier halachic codes, there's a law on the books that if you said either of these without kavanah, you should start over and say the prayer again. We do not rule this way anymore, because unfortunately, we've acknowledged the fact that we've become a very distracted generation. We don't know how to keep a line of thought particularly long. And if that was true 200 years ago or 300 years ago when the later codes were just gave up on this rule, it is certainly more true now that we all carry cell phones. So the halacha now is not that we're allowed to say these prayers without kavanah, but once one did say these prayers without kavanah, it is improper to repeat them with hopes of doing better the second time, because the odds just aren't high enough. Now, how's that for demoralizing? But we should be working for the ideal that the Amidah, at least the first blessing, or we could start with the first blessing, following our above pattern, should be said with kavanah, because without at least that much, we did not fulfill the traditional obligation of prayer from a siddur, of liturgy as a ritual. There was a movement that predated the Mishnah, predated the fall of the Second Temple by a couple of centuries. They actually show up in the book of Maccabees. They were called the Hasidim Harishonim, the early pietists. The movement shows up in the book of Maccabees, by the way, because they refused to fight on the Sabbath. And eventually they gave up and realized that God did not expect them to die to observe the Sabbath. And then they joined the Maccabees in the revolt against the Greeks, the Hellenists. But in any case, these people are recorded in the Talmud as spending 3 hours praying. They would spend an hour leading up to prayer, an hour ramping down from prayer, and an hour on prayer itself. And remember that the structure of prayer itself, centering on the Amidah, already existed. The idea that there were 18 blessings attributed to the prophets at the beginning of the Second Temple, a couple of hundred years before the period in question. So they were spending an hour saying the Amidah. They're spending an hour saying the prayers before the Amidah, an hour saying the prayers and meditating after the Amidah, and an hour saying the Amidah. Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan did the math. That comes to roughly 7 seconds per word. So Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan concludes that the ideal of the Hasidim Harishonim, which although they were not the Pharisees, this particular ideal is praised in the Talmud, was to actually say the Amidah at a meditative pace. Quite literally, if you're spending 7 seconds on each word, and you're saying these words repeatedly during the day, as they did, they were praying 3 times on a regular day, 4 times on Shabbat or a holiday, 5 on Yom Kippur. They were entering meditative states, saying the Amidah. So if you want to fulfill this minimum of saying the first bracha with kavanah, we should try to find, through Hitzpalut, try to find a meaning in each line of the first bracha, so that you can actually be dwelling on each thought at that kind of pace. Because that is what kavanah for Amidah, that is the standard we would like to strive for. I'm not saying we can necessarily reach it. As I said, there's a belief that it's unobtainable and therefore no do-overs. But But the idea would be that we can at least establish an attempt to try for that to be our ideal, to say the first blessing in the Amidah at that pace. Implied in what I said is that the Amidah is the center of Tefillah, which is something I should have made explicit earlier. That the Siddur up to Shema is a ramp up. Shema is Shema. It's its own piece with its own blessings. Then we get to Amidah, and that is the essence of prayer. So if you want a focus of also for lines to say Beit Palut, it may make sense to focus on Poteach et Yadecha, because that is obligatory separately, and the first paragraph of the Amidah. So let's look at the first paragraph of the Amidah, and we're actually going to do a little more teaching and the meaning of words, and a little less exampling, because I think brachot are important. The Baruch Atah Hashem formula shows up, and we'll focus more on it. That'll actually be a central theme of next week's presentation. But we will deal with some of it now. Fortunately, we only have some of it to deal with now, because it goes off in a different direction very early. So we have Baruch Atah Hashem. I bless you is the normal translation. God. Elokeinu, our God. The Elokei Elokeinu, and the God of our ancestors. You notice a few things there, like God, our God, and the God of our ancestors. 3 different words. I translated them all God. Maybe 2 different words, one with different possessive. But why does it say Adonai in the first instance, and Elokeinu in the others? The difference is in connotation. Here I wrote that God is the source of all increase, because the word, the 4-letter name of God, is actually, or can be read as the causative conjugation. Remember, I don't claim to be an expert on grammar terms. The causative conjugation of to exist. Lahavot is to exist. Haya is was. Hoveh is. And if you throw a yud in front, you get the causer of existence. So we can actually translate this: you are blessed, as a statement of fact, the cause of existence. There are other ways to read Baruch, but I'm not going to read it as I bless you, because I cannot bless God. I cannot change God. I might be able to change humanity's perception of God. I might be able to change God's relationship to creation by changing the relationship, but I can't change God. So I have to do something with that line, and that is the big open question that I want to teach you, and if you will come back next week. Elokeinu, the Elokei Elokeinu, our God and the God of our ancestors. How do we relate to God differently than our ancestors? Well, when we talk about stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we get stories of things like miracles. We get stories, narratives used as tales of things we should emulate. We get stories of things dangers we should avoid, cautionary tales. The relationship of God to our ancestors, to the characters in Tanakh, whether we talk about the literal forefathers or later on, after the establishing generations, we're dealing with people who relate to God, or at least we discuss their relationship to God on the moral plane. When we talk about our God, we don't necessarily see that good guys come out ahead. So Elokeinu, the Elokei Elokeinu, even though I'm saying one my God, in the other case I'm saying that the God is somebody else, right? There's a fundamental difference, because with somebody else, I only know about from a different kind of story about how God responds than my personal experience. So my God is a God, maybe more a God of nature, a God who works through historical forces, whereas the God of my ancestors is somebody who deals on a moral plane, where we trust that good will win out on the end and evil will destroy itself. and that is the way God set up the universe, and that is the way God will respond to our actions. There's one more piece I threw in. I wasn't really sure about this because I'm sticking to the Orthodox text of only listing the men, but I did make this slide just for this audience. So the Siddur that I use says Elokei Abraham, Elokei Yitzchak, and Elokei Yaakov, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But it's the God of Abraham. What does it mean that Abraham owns a God? The God of Abraham. He's Abraham's God. What does that mean? And why is that the way we're opening up prayer? That Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob each found a way to acquire God. Right? Different ways, because we're listing them separately. We didn't stop at Elokei Elokeinu at a generic statement. We're saying Abraham acquired God his way. Isaac acquired God his way. Jacob acquired God his way. And that is the theme that we want to open the Amidah. We want to open the core tefillah, the core listening to the senior partner, with is this idea that each person in their own way found a way to connect to God, to make him his partner, to join with God, and for God to actually be Abraham. Not an abstract, philosophical, I can only know what he isn't kind of intellectual exercise, but actually a person, so to speak, in our life. And that is really the role of tefillah, is to relate to God, to begin the habit of turning to God. I'm going to interrupt myself for a second. There are 5 minutes left, so if people want to text questions, now is a good time to start collecting them, because if you don't text them now, I can't answer them before 9 o'clock. There is a chat window. I don't know exactly how Jeff had set things up for people to ask questions. But if you do have questions, I am available after this class as well on Micha, M-I-C-H-A, @express.org. But in the meantime, back to the topic. So the entire exercise, Jeff? There it is, thank you. The entire exercise of tefillah is actually to say Elokei Abraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov is also Elokei Micha. It's also my God. That I actually can have somebody to make requests of. Let's go back to where we opened, because that'll tie it up in a nice bow, which is only something we want out of the speech. We opened with the idea that Jacob referred to the tefillah as a sword, and tachanunim and ba'uton in Aramaic requests as an arrow. And there's a fundamental difference that the Talmud spells out between the metaphor of a sword and an arrow. So tefillah is a sword, and tachanunim is an arrow. And there's a fundamental difference. And that is, it pays to trade with a sword. I had a roommate in college who was a fencing, he was on the Yeshiva University fencing team. Yes, we nearly made it big, the Maccabee fencing team. But in any case, he did practice using a sword. But if I would have picked up a sword and switched it around, I could probably hurt somebody badly. Unlike if I tried shooting an arrow, where odds are the only thing I would do is cut the inside of my thumb with the little feather thing on the back of the arrow as it passed, and totally miss the mark. The tefillah is like a sword because we're told what to do. We may not be told enough. We may have to actually take the sword and learn how to use it wisely. But anybody given a sword can accomplish at least something. Unlike tachanunim, which is more like shooting an arrow. You could get much further praying to God by expressing, by relating to Him one-on-one as that, these are the things I need. These are the things that would best serve our covenant our partnership to build something, a better me, a better world together. But if I don't learn it, it is entirely useless. So we have to start with tefillah. Tefillah brings us to tachanunim. And that actually is the structure of the Siddur. We have the ramp-up we have the ramp-up prayers. We have Shema. After we've ramped up, and we have Kavanah, which is its own mitzvah, and not entirely related to the Siddur, to the mitzvah of Tefillah. It's a separate mitzvah of Shema. But we use the ramp-up. We use the Kavanah building experience for both. And then after Tefillah, we actually have a prayer called Tachanun, in which we ask God for mercy and to heal the world and to end the exile and to end the injustice and to, many things, and to have compassion on us and to have compassion on the Jewish people and to have compassion on humanity. And this is Tachanun, and it comes after Tefillah, because we need tefillah, we need the ability to make God Elokei Abraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, and even Elokei Micha before Tachanunim, before personal requests, really can operate on the right plane. Before I'm asking God for what is in the best interest of the grand plan, as opposed to what is in the best interest given my own short-sighted ideas of what I want. And there's one prayer in between the Amidah, the traditional version, and I know that a number of Siddurim offer alternatives, starts Elokai Nesor, asking God for help to keep our mouths quiet. Somebody interested in Mussar should really look at the text of that prayer, especially if they're offered alternatives, because that prayer is really asking for God's help in our Mussar work. We're asking for help in our speech, in our temper, in our gravitation toward physical enjoyments, which are not terrible, but they shouldn't be what life is about. But in any case, notice it's written in the singular, because this too is tachanunim. This too is a request. It is not so much the prophets telling me what I should be requesting. It is now that I got to the end of what the prophets are telling me I should be requesting. What things are they that I would most naturally be requesting? And I don't mean most naturally requesting to be a better me. I believe, yes, it's my watch is correct. Okay. I believe, so that brings us to the end of the first. That brings us to the end of the first class. The second class will focus on blessings. So do yourself a favor and bring a drink or something else that requires a blessing with you. I recommend a drink because this way we don't have to get into the rules of what other things get a shahakol blessing, a bracha. But we will be discussing blessings. We'll be discussing more the non-cognitive modalities of hitpa'alut and how to bring them to prayer. The notion of blessings and bringing prayers throughout the day. And last but not least, my favorite problem, how come Tevi the milkman could talk to God while he walks down the road, if you remember that scene from Fiddler on the Roof, and yet for me, God seems so remote, and it's so hard to achieve that kind of ba'uton, that kind of one-on-one expressing what I'm feeling towards God. This webinar is brought to you by the Mussar Institute, which is offering a fantastic, and I can tell you this because I have a subscription, program called Mida Aman. It's subscription price is as per the slide. The URL, the web address is also as per the slide. mussarinstitute.org/Buddha_a_month. Every month you get reading material that brings a new midah into focus. Usually comes out the first of the month, but don't read it all the first day. You have to get an ace for what each day. It has chants, it has practices. I really personally gain a lot from it. So I can't praise it, I can't picture a way that I would be praising it too highly. So I highly recommend those of you who don't currently have subscriptions to give it a try. And hope to speak to you all next week.
Thank you all. As I said, we will be sending out a link to next week's webinar and a link to the recording for tonight. So thank you, everybody, and have a good evening.